Dr. Heidi Grant here. Welcome back to another episode of 3 Things to Do. Before we get started, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Today's topic is one that really is useful for everyone. It's 3 things to do to make better decisions. Let's face it, we've all made some pretty bad decisions in our time. And very often it can be difficult to understand why we made the decisions we made. In retrospect, it just doesn't seem to make sense. But what's even more important is to start to be able to get ahead of that, right? To make sure that we're taking steps when we make decisions, especially important ones, that will keep us from ending up regretting whatever it was that we decided. So we can minimize our future regret by understanding just a little bit more about why our brains sometimes lead us astray when we make decisions. We hear a lot these days about the idea of unconscious bias. And sometimes I think that word bias has a really strongly negative connotation, and understandably so. But when scientists talk about unconscious bias, really all we're talking about is the brain's tendency for a variety of reasons to either over-anchor on or ignore really relevant information when we're making a decision. So the strategies I want to share with you today will help us to make sure we're not paying too much attention or too little attention to the information we need to make really good decisions. The first strategy you can use to be better at making decisions is to slow down or sleep on it. A lot of the kinds of biases that we encounter when we make decisions are the result of just moving too quickly. And it's understandable. We all have a lot that we're trying to do every day, and we have tons of information that we're having to register. But when it's something that's really important, you really want to take a little bit of additional time to simply slow down, and that alone will help mitigate a lot of the biases that can lead us astray. And as I said, ideally sleep on it. Let your unconscious mind process that decision a little bit better. Often we wake up the next morning realizing things about our decision that hadn't occurred to us before. Now, the second strategy you can use to make better decisions is to consider the advice you would give someone else making the same decision. And this is a particularly great strategy when it comes to making decisions that involve risk. Whenever we're making a decision that involves some risk to ourselves, the idea of risk is overwhelming to the brain. And again, we tend to over-anchor on risk rather than the potential rewards associated with that decision. But when we give other people advice about risky decisions, we don't do that. We weigh the pros and cons much more evenly for other people. So a great way to know whether or not a risk is worth taking is to think about whether you'd recommend it to someone else. Usually the advice we give someone else is the advice we should be taking for ourselves. And finally, the last strategy you can use to make better decisions is to get another perspective. One of the biggest problems we have when we make decisions is we often assume that we have all the information we need to make a good decision. But that's not necessarily the case. In fact, it usually isn't. We only see things from our own perspective. Another person with another perspective might catch something you would miss. So getting another perspective, getting that second opinion, is a really great way to make sure you end up making the best decision. So let's go over those 3 things to do to make better decisions one more time. The first, slow down or sleep on it. Taking a little extra time to make sure you're really thinking something through is going to be really worth it in the end. Second, consider the advice you would give someone else, particularly if it's a decision that involves some risk. Usually the guidance we give other people is really the best guidance there is. And lastly, get another perspective. It can really help to get a second opinion to make sure there's nothing that you're missing when it comes to making a really big decision, especially one with lasting impact. So thanks again for tuning into 3 Things to Do. Again, hit that like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. And feel free to share this video with someone in your life who's trying to make a big decision to make sure that they make a good one. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.